Since we are a week out from opening day on the show today, I'm going to predict the 26-man roster the Mets will start their season with in 2023.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Check out the Gametime app today. Now, we are going to be breaking down the opening day roster on today's show. I wanted to have a prediction series about a week out so I could see how right or wrong my takes are on what the Mets are going to go with come opening day. And before we get into the nitty gritty of who's going to grab that last spot on the bench, and I guess theoretically the starting lineup if Brett Baty does break camp as the opening day third baseman. And then also, before we get into the bullpen, which I think there's still a lot up in the air, I wanted to look at the 40-man roster and the injury situation and how that could ultimately relate to the decisions the Mets had to make come next Thursday. So, first things first, 2 spots on the 40 will open up because Jose Quintana and Edwin Diaz are both expected to go on the 60-day IL. With Quintana, I guess theoretically, the Mets could hold off on making that decision, but all of the different timetables we've heard make it seem like 60 days, probably nothing as it relates to this injury, so I imagine they're both there. So that opens up 2 spots. Guys that could be added to the 40-man roster come opening day. For one, we're going to get to these 2 later on in the bullpen, but you have Tommy Hunter and TJ McFarland. Then on the offensive side, you have DJ Stewart or Tim Locastro, all guys who are having relatively good springs that has some MLB experience that could make this team come opening day. But the big news from today, before we get into my predictions, is a guy who will not break camp with the team, even though he declared that he would coming in to spring, and that is Francisco Alvarez, the Mets' top prospect. He did not hit too well in camp, but Buck Showalter made it very clear that what he has to work on is his defense. I think anyone outside of Alvarez and his family and maybe his top admirers knew this was coming, but this is an interesting timing of it, a week ahead of kind of a set deadline to make that decision. They sent him down to minor league camp. They assigned him AAA Syracuse, and I think this is the best thing for him. You see guys like Mark Vientos and Brett Baty still in camp. Those are guys that we really felt like had a better chance to break camp with the team because for a lot of it, it's the lack of defensive concern. Now, Vientos, there's still defensive concerns, but it's more a matter of the role he's going out for. He's going for that right-handed power bat against left-handed pitching role where he could DH, play some first base, and I guess in a pinch be thrown in a corner, whether that be in left field or at third base. But most likely, it would strictly be a hitting role. For Baty, it's the potential to be the starting third baseman. For Alvarez to catch from the jump, it was asking too much, and this is a prospect that you do not need to rust. I mean, Buck Showalter is really pushing back that timetable, saying that, Alvarez can be a September call-up. Now, clearly that is, a challenge almost, right, to Alvarez, but it's also more, let's put the brakes on this idea that he has to be the guy this year. According to Buck Showalter, the Mets have 2 top 7 catchers in baseball, I think he said, with Narvaez and Nido. I think he means defensively, but I do believe that is a huge factor that the Mets consider, particularly with the catching position. They want strong defenders out there, really at each spot, but particularly behind the plate. And also when you have such a veteran pitching staff that a young catcher would have to command if Alvarez was to start the season with the Mets or come up at any point. So this is the perfect way to manage him a little bit, to let him work on some things offensively, because he's not without flaws there. He's the guy that can get exposed by some high heat. He's going to be attacked up in the zone with fastballs, and he's got to learn how to lay off or to manage those pitches better, because a lot of times he can chase, swing through it, and that's just going to lead to a lot of strikeouts. He can get exposed a bit. Now, if a pitcher leaves that pitch, if they're going for the high heat and they end up dropping it down a little bit and ends up belt high, well, Alvarez can put it in the seats, and that's why he swings so aggressively on fastballs. But he still has some approach things to work on offensively and defensively. There's a lot that can be learned when you're 21 years old and still beginning his career as a catcher. So I think this was what everyone expected to happen, but now we know for sure Alvarez will not be part of the team to start the season. And if everything breaks right and Narvaez and Nido are not just complete disasters offensively and they are commanding a pitching staff well and they're staying healthy, who knows when exactly we'll see Alvarez get the call. The other prospects, though, have a legitimate chance to make this team come opening day. And of course, I'm referring to Mark Vientos and Brett Baty. We're going to discuss them and the other position players that are vying for that last spot on the team in just a minute. Before we get to that, though, today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Have you ever been in a situation where you want to go to a game, but finding tickets is so stressful that you ultimately decide it's just not worth it? You'll watch the game from home. Well, Gametime is a fast and easy way to get tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you, with killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, so you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you're going to have at whatever event you're trying to attend. I know I needed some tickets for opening day here in Miami. I live in South Florida, so not a far drive for me and my dad to take. And I went to Gametime, found a really good deal on a couple of seats for us, and I'm going to be really keyed into this app. I knew that the tickets were going to be a little bit harder to get for opening day. For the other games of this series, I know they're going to be a little more widely available, and I am positive I can get a great deal at Gametime because they have the Gametime guarantee, which means you're always going to get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section or row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. Get images of your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you get to the ballpark. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds with just 2 taps and you're all set. Tickets are sent directly to your phone so you never have to dig through your email and you can snag tickets without the stress. So this is why you must download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem with the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today for last-minute tickets and their lowest price guaranteed. When it comes to position players on the Mets opening day roster, we've been saying it all spring, the team is pretty set. Now, Brandon Nimmo's the one question mark right now. He could be on the injured list to start the year, but the Mets apparently are optimistic. They plan to work him into some games. He's feeling a lot better, so hey, Brandon Nimmo is the opening day center fielder, something I think all of us would sign up for. If he's available, you got him, Starling Marte, Mark Cannon, and Tommy Pham as the 4 outfielders. Now, Tim Locastro, I think, would be the replacement. If Nimmo went down, you'd have to get a legitimate center fielder on the roster. So we'll just say if Nimmo's on the IL, imagine Locastro's added to the 40 and is part of that active roster come opening day. But for now, for the purpose of this exercise, he's still a name to circle back on as the 13th man, because beyond those 4 outfielders of Nimmo, Marte, Canna, Pham, he got Pete Alonso, Jeff McNeil, both coming off their silver medals in the World Baseball Classic. Shout out to Jeff McNeil for getting on base as the only guy from Team USA to do so against Shohei Ohtani in that 9th inning. Way better than Mookie Betts and Mike Trout, obviously. You saw that walk. I mean, guy's unbelievable, right? You have those 2 guys that are obviously set in stone. You got Francisco Lindor. You got Eduardo Escobar, who might not be in the starting lineup, but he's certainly going to be on the opening day roster. And then you got Guillorme. So I think your infield set with those 5. That brings us to 9 players. You got Narvaez and Nido behind the dish. That takes you to 11. And then you got Vogelback, who's going to be your DH. So that's 12 position players. So now you're looking at the 13th spot. Now, if it's the guy on the guaranteed MLB contract that can't be optioned, it's Darin Ruf. I believe Darin Ruf is going to be cut. I really don't think he breaks camp with the team. That would be the easy choice. I don't think the Mets are going to make that choice. I think they're going to want a more either malleable player to fit their roster or a higher upside player. So when it comes to that spot, Mark Vientos to me is a higher upside play than Darin Ruf. When it comes to malleability, I look at Danny Mendick or Tim Locastro as guys that could serve a role. For Mendick, it's a guy that could play all over the infield, give you maybe a little bit of pop against left-handed pitching as a righty, guy who could even play a little bit of outfield if you had to. With Locastro, you're looking at someone that's going to bring you speed and defense, which this outfield in particular could certainly need. So I look at those options over Ruf, and I think that is ultimately a direction the Mets would go. And then you even have, of course, the Vientos or the Baty of it all, top prospects that could make this team that much better. There's just too many good options for Darin Ruf to make it. So while we can't rule him out a week out of opening day, I don't think he's going to make this team. Now, DJ Stewart is the only other name that we should discuss as a potential option. He has had a great camp. He's 10 for 26 with 7 walks and 7 strikeouts, a .529 on base percentage, but he hasn't been starting a lot of games. He's been coming in and cleaning up a little bit. I don't know if DJ Stewart's actually going to make this team. He's on a minor league contract. Feels to me like, oh man, I forgot my guy's name again from last year, and that tells you all you need to know. I can picture him exactly. Oh, it's going to drive me nuts. The guy that was parked in AAA, who I believed had all the potential, and we never saw him, and I guess maybe that's why his name deserves to be forgotten. If you want to comment, if you're watching this on YouTube, of the guy that I mentioned a million times last year, and I'm blanking on his name right now, feel free to do so. But I think DJ Stewart is the type of guy that's going to be in AAA, and if an injury opens up some playing time, if somebody goes down, you need an outfielder, he could be called on. I don't think he breaks camp with the team. So that leads me back to those other guys we were looking at. And I look at 4 that really intrigue me. Mendick is a guy that I think will play a role this season, although he still has 2 options. So I think, coming off the ACL, although he is playing in games and probably would be ready for opening day, I imagine he is going to be playing kind of a utility role in Syracuse. He'll be starting some at short, second, third, in the outfield a little bit, keep him ready. And whenever something happens at the big league level, if Mendick is hitting, he'll get the call. You will see him at some point, that is for sure. I just don't think it's by opening day. This narrows it down to Mark Vientos, Brett Baty, and Tim Locastro. My prediction, which I kind of tipped my hand on yesterday's show, is that Brett Baty will be the starting third baseman come opening day, that they're going to make that decision, or at least include him on the roster. But if it's not him, I actually think it might be Baty. I think that Locastro is another guy on a minor league deal that you can option outright and be fine. It wouldn't surprise me. I think it's one of those 3. If it's anybody else that grabs that last spot, I would be a little bit surprised if they went to Ruf. Like, that would kind of shock me at this point, but we'll see. I think it's down to those guys competing. I think Locastro is the safe choice based on the MLB experience and a role that he could serve. But I think that Baty and Vientos just give you so much more. Vientos has got a lot of runs so far in spring. He's 15 for 53, 5 walks to 12 strikeouts, 2 home runs, 5 doubles. So he's slugging .491, getting on base at a .316 clip. If they want a specialized guy to be part of that DH platoon with Vogelback, he's my answer. Now, Baty gives you a completely different element, and I think he has earned the job, as I spent all of yesterday's show on. So I'm still putting him in to my opening day roster, because as much as this prediction is what I think the Mets will do, it's also what I think the Mets should do. And that would be putting Brett Baty as that 13th man, and really not even the 13th man, because I think he gets more playing time than Guillorme, than Escobar, even than a Tommy Pham, or potentially a Vogelback. I think he's in there almost every day at third base. I think against a tough lefty, they'll start Escobar there. I think Escobar gets some at-bats as a righty facing lefties at third base and DH, and could spare your McNeils at second, your Baty at third, obviously. Even Alonso at first base if they want to have him DH for a day. I think Eduardo Escobar on your bench suddenly makes that bench a lot better. If your bench this season is Escobar, Guillorme, Pham, and Vogelback, essentially, with him being the DH, and of course, whatever guy's not catching, I like what the Mets have. I think Tommy Pham was still a mistake of a signing. I made that proclamation on a podcast a few weeks ago. I still stand by it. I think this team is better. If instead of him being on the roster, you're looking at Tim Locastro, just giving you speed and defense, and then any other at-bats that need to be, taken, suddenly if Baty's your third baseman, Escobar slides right into the mix there, whether you are putting McNeil in the outfield at times or if it's just the DH at-bats. So that's where I am right now. Again, the overall roster would be Nimmo, Marte, Canna, Pham, Alonso, McNeil, Lindor, Escobar, Guillorme, Baty, Narvaez, Nido, and Daniel Vogelback. To close things out, though, who will be part of this pitching staff? That is a lot tougher to decide. So many names that could factor into the mix when you look at the bullpen. We're going to get to that in just a minute. Before we do, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. We are at that point where the tournament is heating up for college basketball. You also have the NBA playoffs right around the corner. It is time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers are going to get a no-sweat bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, it's secure, it's super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores to three-pointers drained. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. I also have my eyes on MLB futures. You want to bet on Pete Alonso to win the MVP, plus 1,600. Lindor, plus 2,500. I like Francisco a little bit more than Pete because the odds are longer. I think he's got just as good of a chance to win. But don't miss your chance to get that no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment matter more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. How will the Mets round out their bullpen this season? It's really tough to decide. I think that the starting rotation is pretty set in stone. I'd be shocked at this point if David Peterson doesn't grab that fifth spot. I think he earned it last year, and he's done nothing in camp to dissuade the Mets from giving him that opportunity. So I think you're pretty much locked in with Scherzer, Verlander, Kodai Senga, Carlos Carrasco, David Peterson. So who are the 8 pitchers that will make up that bullpen? Well, most innings pitched by a reliever in spring, 2 guys, Tommy Hunter and TJ McFarland. McFarland, 8 innings pitched, Hunter, 8 innings pitched. But Tommy Hunter is the answer to me as a guy that's not on the roster now that I think will make the active 26-man roster come opening day because he's been unbelievable this spring. He has yet to allow a run. He has 9 strikeouts to just 1 walk. We've seen him in a Mets uniform the last couple of years. He's been so dependable, and he's just got more experience than a lot of these other guys contending. I think, especially with Diaz not part of the mix and having that extra spot available to guys, I'd be pretty surprised if Hunter doesn't make it. McFarland just seems to be a favorite of Buck Showalter's, but I don't think he's one of the best 8 pitchers that can put in that pen. Now, Jeff Brigham was a guy that I sort of targeted as a really sneaky fit for this bullpen prior to spring training. He has 10 strikeouts and 7 2/3 innings pitched. He has a nasty slider. He has 4 walks in that span. Has given up 3 earned runs. Does have 2 options. So the fact that he has some optionality could work against him, where the Mets decide, look, we have a guy like Steven Nogosek who has no options left. We just picked up Dennis Santana who has no options left. We can park Brigham in AAA, see how these other guys do, and if they struggle, all right, we can go to them. I think that might have been the case had Diaz not gotten hurt. I think Jeff Brigham, more than any of those 3 guys I just mentioned, has a chance to become a high leverage reliever this year because his slider is that good. So I think Jeff Brigham has an inside track to getting one of these jobs, as I also believe with John Curtis. He's allowed 2 earned runs in 6 2/3, 11 strikeouts during that span of 3 walks. He also has 1 minor league option left if you look at FanGraphs. So that is another guy that could technically put in Syracuse. But I just believe personally that Brigham and Curtis are better pitchers than Santana and Nogosek. I mean, those are guys that, again, don't have options. So you look at them and think, okay, maybe. Santana, they literally just picked him up. He was on waivers. They grabbed him, but that means he has no options. He primarily uses his slider, got whiffs over 40% of the time on that pitch last year, so that is something. Also uses his sinker about 40% as well. That sinker lives around 96 miles per hour, but it was hit hard last year. So he mixes in a changeup and a four-seamer, but he pitched to a 5.28 ERA last year, 4.28 the year prior. I don't know. Maybe the Mets go that route. For some reason, I see Santana making the team over Nogosek because Nogosek has just been around longer. I think there's every chance you could pass him through waivers. And he also hasn't pitched well in spring either. So I really don't know here. What we do know about the bullpen is you have David Robertson, you have Adam Ottavino, you hope that Brooks Raley is healthy. That's still something that has to be ironed out, but it seems like he could be good to go. That's your main lefty in the pen. So you really want Raley. You got Drew Smith. That's 4. Tommy Hunter, I think, makes it. John Curtis, I really think, makes it. That brings you to 6. And then you look at the other options outside of the guys I've mentioned. It's also, do you want a long man in that bullpen? If David Peterson's a starting pitcher for you, he's in the rotation. Is Tylor Megill the Trevor Williams of this year? Does he come out of the pen? You also have Eliezer Hernandez, who could factor into that role. Megill has 3 options. Hernandez has 1, so they could put either of them in Syracuse. The thing for me about Tylor Megill is he did not pitch well out of the bullpen last year. You want him to be that starter depth for you, and I think he's better served to be able to fill into the rotation if he is as stretched out and on routine as possible as the ace of the Syracuse Mets starting every 5th day. I think he has things to work on. He's trying to mix in a curveball. That's a pitch that he can toy with in the minors. He can toy with the conserving of his velocity that he's mentioned so he can have it later in starts. You can work on that in Syracuse. And his worst outing of the spring came when he piggybacked David Peterson came out of the bullpen. He was a disaster. So why do I feel confident that he can serve that role as a swingman for the Mets this year? I just don't. So I think Megill gets optioned. Hernandez has been bad. I could see him making the team as a long man, but when you have someone like Tommy Hunter that can get you multiple innings and a couple other guys that I think, Drew Smith has done that in the past a little bit, they have some options. Maybe Brigham can give you more than 3 outs. I think that they're going to maybe avoid having a long man early in the season and see if they need one. See if they have to call on one of these guys. My 8-man bullpen would be Robertson, Ottavino, Raley, Drew Smith, Tommy Hunter, John Curtis, Jeff Brigham. And the last guy, it's tough for me, but I think I would lead towards the new addition of Dennis Santana. So that's my 8. I think Megill and Hernandez join Lucchesi and Jose Budo as starter depth in AAA. And again, I think the starting rotation is Scherzer, Verlander, Senga, Carrasco, and Peterson. So that's my opening day 26-man roster. Tell me I'm wrong if you want to in the comment section. We're going to find out next week. Tomorrow's show, we're going to do some breakdowns of the top 20 prospect in the Mets system for a Friday Farm Report. So make sure you tune into that. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, @FinkelsteinRyan. Follow the show, @Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now, for your second listen, check out Locked On Fantasy Baseball. This is where you want to go if you want to win your leagues this year. You want to be prepared for your drafts. Be ready when season starts for all the waiver wire pickups you can add. Locked On Fantasy Baseball is the place to go. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.